In tonight's story, betrayal runs deep, but revenge runs deeper. You're listening to Revenge with Jack, where justice always finds its way. They said it like they were clearing a throat. We don't need old men like you dragging us down. Savannah flicked her hair as if the sentence had been a smudge on a mirror. My name is Elliot Granger, 59, operations manager at Coal Industrial Works for 18 years. I was never the speechmaker at the quarterly meetings or the guy who took a bow on plant tours. I was the hand on the brake, the one who knew which machine carried a slight wobble when the humidity rose, which foreman went quiet when a bearing began to sing. I smiled, a small, tired curve, nodded once, and stood. No scene, no exit line. I gathered what life fits inside a cardboard box. A photo of Lydia in a red scarf at Brown County State Park, a brass micrometer that had belonged to my grandfather, a coffee mug with a faded "World's Okayest Boss." The younger staff looked anywhere but at me, the carpet, their screens, a peeling corner of safety tape. Some of them I had hired when acne still mapped their cheeks, and now they showed me the mercy of silence. It stung less than the applause a few years back when we shipped our 10,000th press. Less and also more. Martin Cole, who built this company with grease under his nails and a mortgage on his courage, had chosen me when his heart began tapping a warning. "You're the one I trust not to cut corners," he'd said, and I believed him because he'd never asked me to run faster than the facts. Savannah, his daughter, 28, fresh from a sunlit stint in Miami and a business degree, believed in other things: dashboards, disruption, a word cloud of future tense. Maybe she was right about some of it. Maybe not about timing. Not about people. I carried the box past the production floor. The hydraulic line looked like a river that had forgotten its own depth. I knew the way the pressure would whisper at 2 a.m. when a seal began to give. That's the kind of knowledge you cannot spreadsheet. Through the window, I saw the team I had trained still moving, but I could hear the slack behind the rhythm. A plant remembers. Out in the parking lot, I set the box on the truck seat and folded my hands on the wheel. Inside the glove compartment lay a copy of my contract, dog-eared at Section 12. Martin had insisted on it years ago, a simple clause that said if I was let go without cause, the company owed me 2 years' salary. He wanted to keep me from being poached. He also wanted to keep the place honest. Savannah hadn't checked, or she had, and assumed I wouldn't. I turned the key, drove home, and set the box on the kitchen table where Lydia used to sort bills on Sundays. The maple in the yard, ours for 26 years, held its posture against a thin wind. I dialed Graham Adler, an old friend who loved contracts the way machinists love tolerances. "It's straightforward," he said after listening. "We'll send notice today." I boiled water, watched it go from calm to impatient. Something in me did the opposite. The work had been taken, but the habits remained: assess, plan, move. I opened a notebook, wrote 3 lines: people, process, proof, and underlined the last word twice. Then I waited for the whistle that meant nothing more than the next shift had begun. The next morning the house had that thin, early quiet, heat kicking on, a robin trying out a note too high for the hour. I set Graham's marked-up copy of the contract on the table and poured coffee into Lydia's favorite mug. It still had a chip on the rim where she once bumped it against the sink and laughed. Everything useful carries a scar. My phone lit up with a name I hadn't expected to see again so soon: Martin Cole. I let it buzz once longer than polite, then answered. "Elliot," he said, voice thinner than I remembered, like someone had sanded down his edges. "What in God's name happened yesterday?" "Ask Savannah," I said. Neutral. Not a dare, just a fact set on the table between us. I did. The pause stretched. I could hear paper riffling, a cough away from the receiver, the old house settling around him. "She said you were resisting her direction, undermining her with the floor team. Silence works like a level. You wait, and the bubble finds the truth." Martin knew me, knew that when I disagreed, I did it in a meeting, not in whispers. He exhaled. "You're going to file, aren't you?" "Already did." Graham sent notice. "It's the clause you wrote, Martin." "I remember." Another exhale. I told her, before I stepped back, that there were protections. She called it legacy friction. His voice dipped on the phrase, as if he couldn't believe he had just used it. I pinched the bridge of my nose. Out the window, the maple winked light through tired leaves. "It isn't just me," I said. "Yesterday she let Victor go. 12 years running engineering. And Marjorie from QC. 30 years of eyes that could find a hairline crack in a prayer. Anyone over 50? He asked, too quickly. Feels like it. The words hung there, heavy as chain. He didn't answer right away. Somewhere on his end a door opened, quick steps, a sharper voice, Savannah's, cutting in and out. I have to go, Martin said. Elliot. The call died before the sentence did. I set the phone down and traced the yellow highlighter over section 12, paragraph 3. Termination without documented cause, 24-month salary. The letters looked more like rail lines than law. Routes people built so goods could keep moving, no matter the weather. Graham had called it airtight. I called it a promise the company made to itself, once, about who we were. By noon I'd called Victor. He answered from his garage, the echo of concrete around his words. They offered me a lump sum and a non-disclosure big enough to cover my mouth and my lungs. Don't sign until Graham looks at it, I said. We'll narrow it to what's truly proprietary. Marjorie picked up from the QC lab. Still there, counting days to retirement and inventory both. They can't spare mistakes, she said. But they're making them anyway. We were a little chorus of displaced parts, humming in different rooms of the same old song. You don't throw away the jig that holds the work straight. I told them both to breathe, to read, to call Graham. After I hung up, the house settled again. I wrote 2 more words under my lines from last night. People. Process. Proof. And added, patience. Pressure. The Midwest has a way of teaching you. Storms roll in, and you check the windows. When the barn leans, you shore it up. When a door closes, you measure twice before you cut a new one. Paper spreads out truth the way a machinist spreads shims. Thin, quiet, decisive. I cleared the kitchen table and laid the contract flat, smoothing a crease with my palm. Graham's notes marched in careful blue. Arrows, dates, a box around section 12. I read the paragraph again and again, until the sentences felt less like legalese and more like handrails in a dark stairwell. Termination without documented cause. 24 months of salary. Simple as a gauge. Hard as a promise. Through the window, the maple stood where Lydia and I had planted it 26 years ago. We'd nursed it through 2 lightning strikes. Wrapped its canker with burlap one winter, a clumsy bandage we pretended would help. It did. Not because burlap heals, but because attention does. The tree had grown past our reach anyway, past our quarrels and paychecks and the scraped plates that once filled this room. I took my coffee outside and touched its bark as if checking a machine for heat. Solid. Patient. A lesson in staying. Back in the kitchen, I drew a small grid in my notebook. Names in the left column, notes in the right. Victor. Marjorie. A handful of supervisors who'd learned to listen for trouble before the vibration chart did. I called them one by one. No speeches. Just instructions, measured and plain. Find your contract. Look for any severance or cause language. Send a scan to Graham. Don't sign an NDA that tries to own your whole mind. Proprietary is specific, not a net. They breathed in fits and starts. I could tell who had teenagers by the noise behind them. Laughter, doors. Who had aging parents by the soft, tired pauses. Work is never just work. It is groceries and inhalers and tuition notices. It is pride, yes, and routine, and the decency of bringing competence to a day. When the calls were done, I stared at the last empty line in the left column. I wrote a single name, Peter Dugan, owner of Pinnacle Parts. He'd been courting me for years with emails that never felt like pressure, only possibility. If you ever want to build the small batch hydraulic line we talked about, I've got floor space and patient money. I dialed before I could decide not to. Elliot, he said, like we'd just stepped out to lunch and returned. I saw a rumor on LinkedIn. You okay? I'm upright, I said. And free. He let the word sit a second. That severance clause you told me about. In motion, I said. But this isn't only about a check. Good, he said. Checks end. Work endures. I told him my simple idea, the one Savannah had waved away as quaint. Custom hydraulic components, short runs, tight tolerances, service baked into the sale. Not the race to the bottom stuff. The work you quote over coffee with a pencil, then program with reverence. He asked about suppliers, about a programmer who could read a blueprint and a room. We traded names. Caleb Ortiz. A kid with good ears and old hands. Come by tomorrow, Peter said. My desk is a mess. That's how you know I'm serious. I hung up and looked at the maple again. The wind had picked up, each leaf reconsidering its grip. I wrote 2 more words beneath my list: steady, build dot, and underlined both. Paper shields you from panic. Roots shield you from pride. Between them, there's a way forward. I rinsed the mug, set it on the rack on its chipped side, the way Lydia always did. Small habits hold a life together when big things try to pull it apart. 3 days later, I sat across a conference table that smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and new anxiety. Downtown, glass walls, city stacked outside like pallets. Savannah came in first, on her phone, eyes bright with the kind of energy that mistakes speed for progress. She didn't sit so much as occupy. Behind her, a young attorney with a tie the color of caution tape. Justin, I'd been told, opened a thin folder that already knew it was insufficient. Graham took his seat beside me, old briefcase soft with miles, glasses perched halfway down his nose. He greeted the room the way you greet a machine you've rebuilt, with respect and zero fear. We're modernizing, Savannah started, flipping a page as if the paper might keep up. We need alignment. Elliot resisted. That's cause. Graham didn't argue. He simply slid the contract forward with a fingertip, the way a machinist nudges a workpiece into the sweet spot. Section 12, he said, voice quiet enough to make everyone lean in. Termination without cause pays 24 months at current salary. Cause, as defined in Appendix C, requires documented performance issues or ethics violations. You have records. Justin lifted a handful of printouts like they might transform midair into proof. They were memos about a new ERP rollout, a chart with arrows, nothing with dates and signatures. He kept looking for a paper that wasn't there. Graham waited. Silence does half the work if you let it. Savannah folded her arms. He undermined me, she said. Told the floor not to listen. I spoke to the floor about tolerances, I said. About safety. About the consequences of shipping a cylinder that won't hold under heat. If that felt like undermining, it wasn't. Graham turned a page. Appendix C calls for a pattern with written warnings. Do you have any? Justin's eyes flicked to Savannah. We don't. Then we do, Graham said, tapping the clause. 2 years. Approximately 320,000. Savannah exhaled through her nose. 6 months, she said. Fair. Graham closed the briefcase as if ending a day. We'll proceed to discovery, he said. And we'll ask the court to consider that you terminated multiple employees over 50 on the same day. That pattern has a name. For a moment, the room changed temperature. Even the glass seemed to listen. I didn't want to fight. I wanted the company to remember itself. But wanting doesn't always choose the next step. Savannah leaned forward. We're prepared to litigate, she said. He'll be tied up for years. And we'll ensure every vendor knows that any company hiring him will be scrutinized. I thought about Peter's messy desk. About the quiet calculus of the custom market Savannah had called quaint. You can do what you like, I said. We're not in the same race. That's when the door opened and Martin appeared, thinner in the face but not in the eyes. He took in the scene the way he used to read a machine. What's vibrating? What's running hot? Savannah, he said, not unkindly. A word. We're in the middle. Now, he said, and there was the old floor boss in his voice. They stepped into the hallway, glass between us like pond ice. Hands moved. A daughter's jaw set. A father's hand sliced the air. When they returned, Martin spoke to Justin. Prepare the severance as written, he said. To me, softer. I'm sorry, Elliot. Savannah wouldn't meet my eyes. This isn't over, she said, gathering her papers. Any supplier that works with you won't work with us. I nodded. The threat was a bridge. She couldn't see there were other banks. The city hummed beyond the glass. Inside, the lemon cleaner kept pretending it could remove what people leave behind. We shook hands we didn't quite mean. In the elevator, Graham said nothing. I could feel the next step settling into place like a gear finding its tooth. The severance landed a week later with the soft chime of a bank notification, a sterile little bell for something that felt like the end of a season. 320,000, minus the bite. Numbers big enough to make a dent in worry, too small to replace a life's rhythm. I didn't celebrate. I swept the back stoop, trimmed a stubborn vine, wiped the counter where coffee rings had been mapping my mornings. Money is loud the first day, and then it quiets. Work is the opposite. I met Victor that afternoon at a diner halfway between our houses. Formica tables, pies under glass, coffee poured like an oath. He looked older than he had 2 weeks ago, as if the fluorescent light at the plant had been keeping time off his face. He stirred his cup without drinking. They gave me a year if I sign, he said, and an NDA that reads like a muzzle and a map. Send it to Graham, I said. He'll carve it down to what's actually proprietary. They don't get to own the laws of physics or the memory in your hands. Victor huffed a small laugh. 40 years in engineering, and suddenly I'm a liability if I talk about tolerances. He turned the sugar packet over twice. You always said the danger wasn't ignorance. It was certainty. Certainty without proof, I said. That's how bridges fall. We let the room move around us. Truckers at the counter, teenagers counting tips, the grill throwing up a brief, peppered fog. What are you going to do? He asked finally. Build, I said. With Peter Dugan. He's backing a small shop we'll call Cornerstone Precision. Short-run hydraulics, high mix, tight specs, service like it used to mean something. The work's Savannah labeled inefficient. Victor sat back. The custom line. He tapped the table, each knuckle a metronome. Martin always said that's where we'd stay alive, where knowledge beats scale. Savannah thinks she can outrun overseas on price, I said. We can't. Not on a good day, not on a bad one. But we can outrun them on fit, on service, on being the call you make when a machine fails at 3 a.m. and you need a part that fits not just the drawing, but the story. He looked at the window, where a winter sun was taking stock of the parked cars. They'll come after you, he said. Suppliers, too. She'll make the calls. I know, I said. But there are other suppliers, other roads. And there's the simple math of reputation. People remember who shows up with a wrench and stays until the leak stops. Victor reached for his wallet, then didn't. You need an engineer, he said, trying to make it sound casual and failing. I need a partner who can hear a bearing going bad through a wall, I said. Once Graham trims that NDA to fit the law, not the fear. He folded the napkin in half, then in half again. I've got a granddaughter starting college, he said. I thought I wanted less to do. Turns out I want the right things to do. Good, I said. We'll start there. When we stood, the waitress slid a slice of apple pie toward us and said, for luck. We split it with 2 forks, the crust collapsing just enough to make a mess. Some messes mean you're alive. Outside, the sky had that clean, late light. The kind that promises cold and keeps it. 2 months later we had a floor, a name on the lease, and noise that meant beginnings. Cornerstone Precision lived inside an old warehouse on the east side. Bricks shouldering up to sky like it remembered weight. Peter Dugan spread supplier contracts across his desk the way a dealer fans cards, except nothing here depended on luck. Tooling's confirmed, he said, tapping a paragraph. Hendrix Metals will hold our tolerances on the bar stock. The heat treat slot is ours every Thursday. He looked at me over his glasses. You still sleep? Enough, I said. The kind that resets a man and not just a clock. On the floor, electricians threaded cable through trays, a slow knitting. Pallets of fixtures waited with the patience of things that know their purpose. We bought a pair of used CNC mills with good bones and ugly paint, the best kind. Caleb Ortiz arrived that Monday, toolbox in one hand, a spiral notebook in the other. 28, quiet, listening like it was a trade. At Cole Industrial Works, he'd rebuilt post-processors in his off hours because no one would give him budget time. Here, he started by cleaning the vices as if they were a chapel. Then he wrote a setup sheet so clear even a sleepless man could follow it without cursing. I'll keep programs under revision control, he said, unasked, and mirror the repository offsite at night. He said it like weather, not like bragging. Marjorie texted after lunch. A photo, slightly askew, of an internal memo at Cole. Production delays, scrap spikes, 3 angry clients circling the exit. I felt it in my stomach first, a gravity shift. No gloating. Just the ache of knowing names behind numbers. The assembler who brings his mother to dialysis on Thursdays. The woman on third shift who leaves a note for her kid in the lunchbox every night. Eat the carrots, dream loud. Peter read the memo and whistled low. We expected slippage. Not this soon. Brain drain, I said. You pull enough threads, and the blanket doesn't argue. It just stops being a blanket. We stood at the mezzanine rail watching a rigger place our first machine. The chains sang a careful note. I thought of Savannah's promises to outrun price with slogans. Of the way a gasket fails only once, and then you remember respect. I didn't want Cole to collapse. I wanted it to remember the craft it once married to speed. We should call Midwest Manufacturing, I said. Not to poach. To tell them what we'll be ready for. 60 days. Small runs first, then the assemblies we know better than our own birthdays. Peter nodded, already pulling up a calendar. I'll get us in next week. They've been eyeing the exit sign since January. Caleb walked over, wiped his hands on a clean rag. Level's good, he said. But the slab slopes more than the print says. I'll shim it. No drama. Thank you, I said. 2 words that felt like a vow. As evening folded in, the warehouse lights hummed into their steady tone. The new logo, Cornerstone Precision, lettered without swagger, hung over the office door. I snapped the last breaker and listened to the room settle. Not silence. Readiness. Like a held breath just before someone says yes. I texted Marjorie back. Hold steady. We're building something honest. Doors will open. Then I put my phone face down and labeled the first tool drawer in Caleb's neat script. Measure. Cut. Check. Repeat. The work would teach us how to carry it. The call came late, after we'd shut down the floor, and the light in the warehouse had turned the color of nickel. I was at my desk, cataloging a drawer of N Mills by Shank size because order steadies a man, when the phone hummed and brought up a name I still felt in my chest before I saw it. Martin Cole. Elliot, he said, and something in the way he formed my name told me this wasn't a courtesy call. You got a minute? I do, I said. Behind me, the mills sat in their foam like a small choir, all holding the same note. I know about Cornerstone, he went on. About the folks you've hired. I'm not calling to tell you to stop. He paused. The air on his end sounded cavernous, the way big houses do at night. I'm calling to ask for help. The word hung there, simple as a wrench. Tell me, I said. She's been selling equipment, he said. No names, but we didn't need them. The custom machines we bought last year? Half gone. Cashing out inventory, pushing volume we can't hold to spec. The board's restless. I'm worse than restless. His voice thinned. I should have listened to you when you said she wasn't ready. I turned my chair toward the mezzanine window. Below, Caleb had left a setup sheet taped to a vise with blue painter's tape, the edges squared to the world. What do you need, Martin? I want you to come to my house, he said. Tonight, 7. Quietly. Bring Victor if he'll come. The board wants to discuss options. Options, I said, letting the word find its shape. Like changing leadership. Like finding a way to save what's left, he said. I kept 51% for a reason I couldn't name at the time. Maybe this is it. I thought about the people still inside Coal Industrial Works, the assembler with Thursday dialysis runs, the woman who writes lunchbox notes. I thought about the maple in my yard, how it took 2 lightning strikes and still decided to leaf out each spring. Pride and grievance made a little noise in me, then quieted when they realized what the work was asking. I'll be there, I said. No promises. Fair, he said, and the line softened. Elliot, I'm here. Thank you for still answering. After we hung up, I called Victor. He picked up on the first ring. If this is about shims, I agree with you in advance, he said, trying for light. Martin wants us at his place at 7, I said. Board talk. I could hear him sit down. You going? I am, I said. If there's a way to keep the place from bleeding out, we should at least look. Okay, he said. I'll bring the notes I shouldn't have kept and didn't read. I left Peter a voicemail with the bare facts. He called back a minute later. Go, he said. Companies are machines, but they're also towns. If there's a way to keep the lights on, you try the switch. At home, I changed my shirt, the good one Lydia used to call my meetings and marriages blue. On my way out, I stopped at the maple and set my hand against the trunk. Steady, I said, to it or to myself. Maybe both. The road to Martin's house felt familiar and new at once, like walking through a plant after a retool. Everything where it was, everything about to change. 6 months from the day I carried a cardboard box to my truck, I stood at the back wall of Coal Industrial Works' main conference room with my hands clasped, as if holding a hat I no longer wore. The all-hands had the tension of a fire drill no one wanted to admit was real. New executives, young, trim, uncertain, lined one side like a row of fresh tools still in plastic. Savannah owned the front of the room with a clicker and a deck, the city skyline glinting behind her through glass. The board sat off to the left, Martin among them, paler, quieter, eyes taking notes a pen couldn't. She was halfway through slide 14, market headwinds and legacy inefficiencies, when she noticed me. Her voice stumbled, then found its heels. What is he doing here? She asked, pointing as if I were a leak under a machine. The board chair rose, a man who liked clean lines. "Ms. Cole," he said, "we'll address that presently." He nodded to Savannah. "Please complete your report." She hurried through the rest. Downward arrows softened by color. A revenue cliff called it temporary recalibration. Quality misses attributed to transition turbulence. When the lights came up, the room did not applaud. It breathed. The chair stood again. "We've reviewed the quarter," he said. "Revenue down 37%. Client attrition. Scrap rates above tolerance. We've heard your explanation. We've also convened to decide leadership." Savannah laughed, the short kind. "You can't be serious." Martin rose slowly. "We are," he said. His voice had gravel in it again, the good kind. "Elliot." I stepped forward with a folder that looked a lot like the one Graham had used months ago, only the weight inside was different. "We're proposing a merger," I said, calm as a setup sheet. "Cornerstone Precision will absorb Cole Industrial's custom hydraulics division, the part of this company that knows how to keep promises under heat. The remaining operations will continue with a new, experienced leadership team. We've prepared a plan that rehabs process control, restores vendor trust, and returns service to the center of the offer." Savannah's mouth tightened. "You don't have the authority." Martin looked at her, not unkindly, the way a father does when he remembers the first time she rode a bike and the first time she fell. "You hold 20%, Savannah," he said softly. "I retained 51. I've voted in favor of the merger." The papers slid across the table toward her, a quiet tide. She flipped pages, lips moving over terms. "This is predatory," she said. "It's remedial," I said, "and survivable." Victor stepped into the doorway then, sleeves rolled, tie a loose suggestion. "If the board approves," he said, "I'll take operations. We'll map every failure mode in the line, rebuild the Traveler, and cut batch sizes until quality stops shouting." A murmur moved through the room, the sound of people hearing a plan instead of a slogan. The chair looked down the table. Heads nodded, slowly, like machines starting from cold. Savannah stared at me. "This isn't over," she said. "Vendors loyal to Cole won't follow you." "Some won't," I said. "Some will. The ones who value being paid on time and treated like partners." Martin exhaled, a long-held breath released. "We begin today," he said to the room. "We choose craft over speed. We choose learning over slogans. We choose to last." Outside the glass, the city went on keeping its own promises. Inside, signatures began. The pen felt heavier than it looked. A year is enough time for a building to learn its own echo. The expanded facility, Cornerstone Precision stitched to what we began calling Harper Custom Hydraulics, no longer sounded like two companies sharing air. It had the single, steady rhythm of a shop that trusts itself. First shift rolled in with lunch pails and inside jokes. Second took the baton without announcing it. The parts told the truth on the CMM. The numbers on the whiteboard matched the feel in the room. We were not perfect. We were getting better on purpose. From the mezzanine, I watched the small proofs play out. Marjorie, lab coat unbuttoned at the collar, studying a surface finish underlight that shows what pride would rather hide. She'd built a quick visual standard, 10 samples in a case, that turned new hires into better eyes in a week. Caleb stood at a monitor with 2 apprentices, a brother and sister from Arsenal Tech. He had them read a toolpath out loud the way a teacher has you read a poem, slow, so the cadence settles in your bones. "This isn't just code," he said. "It's a promise about what the cutter will do and what it won't." Victor lived in motion, sleeves pushed back, traveler sheets tucked under his arm like a coach's playbook. He cut batch sizes until defects had nowhere to hide, and then smiled the first time the rework bin stayed lonely. We wrote work instructions as if we were teaching our future selves on a bad day. When a fixture failed, we named the failure without shame and fixed the root, not the symptom. It sounds small. It is not. The outside proofs arrived in thicker envelopes. Midwest Manufacturing returned with a handshake that felt like a homecoming. 2 new clients found us by way of a rumor. They answer at 3 a.m. and bring the gasket. We filed 3 patents. One for a modular valve body that forgives small sins in the field, one for a low cavitation spool geometry Caleb sketched after a night of listening, and one for a diagnostic protocol that lets a plant find a failure with a cell phone and patience. Retention steadied. The HR stack of resignation letters went thin enough to clip together with a single paper clip. We built a small apprenticeship with the community college, 4 nights, paid. with meals that tasted like somebody's grandmother had intervened. The first cohort brought their families to a Friday open house. Kids wore safety glasses too big for their faces and drew robots in dry erase marker. On the wall, next to the evacuation map, we taped photos of the old days at Coal Industrial Works, Greece and Triumph both visible. Not nostalgia, continuity. Martin climbed the observation stairs slowly now. Came tapping time. His color came back with the numbers. He handed me a quarterly report that didn't need a euphemism. Margins up, late deliveries down to the rare and explainable. She called, he said quietly. Savannah. Miami in the background. Ocean through a phone. She was starting a consulting firm, looking for seed money. He told her she could come home and learn the business from the floor up. She hung up. Called back the next morning. Is the offer still there? She'd asked. It was. Not a punishment. A path. I watched Caleb guide the apprentices through a first setup, the hesitant joy of a good zero. Nearby, Marjorie signed off a lot with a small, satisfied check. Experience and invention, side by side, like two hands carrying the same box. The maple outside my kitchen window had budded early that year and held on through a late frost. You learn to respect what endures and give it room to grow. From the platform above the line, the shop sounded like a heart that had decided, once and for all, to keep beating. Martin stood beside me, one hand resting on the rail, the other on his cane. Down below, a pallet jack whispered past. A torque wrench clicked like a clock finding noon. I thought about how a company is really a conversation, between past and future, between the quick answer and the right one, between the person who knows the drawing and the person who knows why the drawing matters. We did all this with a sentence, Martin said, eyes on the floor. A clause in a contract. I smiled. A rope tied to the right post, I said. When the wind arrived, it held. He nodded, face loosening a little. I wrote that clause to keep you from leaving. I didn't know it might also keep us from forgetting. A forklift paused while Caleb and the apprentices set a fixture, the kind of stillness that means respect. Across the way, Marjorie signed a lot traveler and patted the top sheet the way my mother used to pat a child's shoulder. Good, go on. Victor, sleeves up, traced a finger over a process map and crossed out 3 unnecessary steps with a pen that squeaked like a tiny door closing. I thought of Savannah in Miami, the surf talking in the background of a call, of her bravery and her hurry, how the world teaches us at the pace we can stand. If she came back, we would start at the floor. We would talk about tolerances and people and the way quality is not a department, but a habit. We would listen to old machines and new ideas without ranking one over the other. Not a punishment, a craft. Outside, in another part of the city, the maple I planted with Lydia was holding up the sky in its small, consistent way. That tree had taught me more about management than a seminar ever could. Water when it's dry, brace when it leans, prune what's dead, leave what still wants the sun. Some years it flamed red. Some years it kept its color to itself. It never apologized for weather. When I go home now, I stand under it and let the day's noise run off. The bank notification from months ago, 320,000, has faded into the ledger of things that mattered only long enough to unlock the things that do. The merger papers, the boardroom, the threat that I'd never work in this town again. These are just notes in the margin of a longer page. What remains is a creed I could write on a single line of a shop wall. Respect what was. Tell the truth about what is. Build what should be. If someone asks for a secret, that's all I have. No speeches. No victory pose. Just work that holds under heat in a room where people can count on each other. Below us, a new order ticket slid into its slot. The light above Station 3 clicked from red to green, and the machine answered with a steady hum. We stood and listened. 2 men who had made their share of mistakes and still believed in repairs. The floor did what good floors do. It carried the weight without complaint. And somewhere in the shop, someone laughed, which is how you know a place intends to last.